Close your eyes and imagine a medieval knight. You're probably picturing some blonde guy in armor shinier than a TV host's teeth, rescuing a princess and talking about honor, justice, and protecting the weak. Well, now open your eyes and throw that image in the nearest trash can. Because the reality is, if you ran into a knight in an alley in the 12th century, you wouldn't see a hero. You'd see a 200-pound professional thug, smelling like dead horse and rusty metal, who would probably cut your hand off just because you looked at his shield a little funny. Welcome to the real history of knighthood. A world where honor was a fancy word for "don't piss me off," and where being a knight was less a spiritual calling and more a retirement plan built on legalized looting. In this video, we're going to tear the myth apart. We're going to see how these tanks with legs became the most dangerous class in Europe. From how a 7-year-old boy was basically put through child labor so he could learn how to kill, to the astronomical cost of his equipment, and how the famous Code of Chivalry was the first great PR manual invented, so the nobility wouldn't wipe each other out by constantly stabbing each other. So get ready, because today we're going to find out that the shining armor was not there to protect the knight's goodness. It was there to hide the fact that underneath, these were some of the most selfish, violent, and wealthy men in history. Let's look at how the war business worked in the Middle Ages. The first thing you need to understand is that you could not just decide to become a knight. It wasn't like signing up for karate classes, it was a question of money. Being a knight was an elite career that only the top 1% of the population could afford. If you didn't have land, castles, or a family that had been skimming taxes since the time of Charlemagne, forget the sword. Your destiny was to plow the fields until your back finally gave out. Let's start with the engine of this tank, the horse. But not just any horse, not one of those animals you see pulling a cart. We're talking about the destrier. This animal was basically the medieval equivalent of a modern battle tank. It had to be strong enough to carry a 200-pound man wrapped in metal, aggressive enough not to panic when arrows started flying, and smart enough to bite and trample enemies on its own. A single elite warhorse could cost as much as 10 or 20 oxen. For a peasant, that was like the budget of the whole village for 5 years. And a knight didn't have just one. He had 3 or 4, in case the main one dropped dead in battle. Then there's the armor. At first it was chainmail, thousands of little iron rings linked together by hand, absurdly heavy and taking months to make. Later came plate armor. Every piece was a custom-built piece of engineering, literally. If you gained 5 pounds, the armor stopped fitting, and you had to go back to the armorer to have it adjusted with a hammer. The cost of a full set of gear, armor, swords, lances, shields, was astronomical. Imagine going to work wearing the value of a 3-bedroom house on your body. Do you understand now why knights didn't usually kill each other on the battlefield? If you brought down an enemy knight, you didn't cut his throat, you captured him. Why? Because now his armor and his horse were yours, and his family would have to pay a ransom that could let you live like a king for the rest of your life. War wasn't hatred. It was a business transaction with a lot of clanging metal. And of course, a knight couldn't even put on his socks by himself. He needed a support system, a whole entourage of pages, squires, stable boys, and blacksmiths. Keeping that traveling circus running cost a fortune every single day. That's why a knight needed land. He needed lots of peasants working for free, so he could pay for his hobby of riding around stabbing people with a lance. So the next time you see a knight, don't think of a hero. Think of a venture capitalist who decided his best financial asset was a double-edged sword. But of course, having the gear doesn't make you a professional. Now that we know knighthood was a rich man's club, how did they turn a pampered noble child into a killing machine? Well, the answer includes years of servitude, humiliation, and learning that other people's lives matter less than yours. Imagine you're 7 years old. At that age today, your biggest concern is probably not getting your tablet taken away or hoping your teacher doesn't assign too much homework. But if you were the son of a noble in the year 1100, your childhood ended overnight. Your parents packed you up and sent you off to the castle of some man you barely knew, usually a feudal lord with more land or a better last name, so you could become a page. Don't let the cute name fool you. Being a page was basically being a glorified waiter. Your job was to learn manners, serve at table, clean your lord's boots, and learn how to play chess. Why chess? Because it was the war simulator of the age. But above all, they taught you how to shut up and obey. If the lord woke up in a bad mood, you were the one getting smacked in the back of the head. It was a school of extreme snobbery. You learned that you stood above everybody who worked the land, but you were still the lowest guy in the castle. By age 14, if you had survived puberty without being killed by an ear infection or a bad-tempered horse, you were promoted to squire. That's when things got serious. The squire was the knight's personal assistant. You had to carry his gear, which, as we've already seen, was worth a fortune. Take care of his horses, polish every ring in his mail, and most importantly, help him get dressed. A suit of plate armor has dozens of pieces held together with leather straps and buckles. A knight could not put all that on by himself. He needed his squire to tighten the bolts for him. In battle, the squire rode or ran just behind the knight. If the knight got thrown off his horse, the squire had to jump in, get him back up, or protect him while he was on the ground. All of that while you're wearing cheaper armor and praying nobody decides you're the easy target. After 7 years of being the knight's punching bag and loyal servant, the big moment finally arrived, the knighting ceremony. And it wasn't always that mystical ceremony in a cathedral with white candles. Sometimes, if there was a war about to start and everybody was in a hurry, the knight would just slap the squire hard and say, "All right, you're a knight now. Don't forget what you've learned." That blow, the colle, was supposed to be the last time the new knight ever took an insult or a hit without defending himself. Now let's talk about the Code of Chivalry, that list of noble values that supposedly forced knights to be saints with swords. The Code of Chivalry wasn't invented to protect the poor. It was invented because knights were so violent and so dangerous that they were wrecking the system. They were like teenagers with steroids and nuclear weapons. They spent their time burning churches and raiding their own neighbors' lands out of boredom. The church, tired of having its barns burned down, came up with the peace of God and the truce of God. Basically, they told them, "Boys, we're going to put some rules in place or God is going to send you straight to hell." When the code said, "Protect the weak," it was not talking about the starving peasant. It was talking about noblewomen, the orphaned children of other nobles, and the church. To a knight, the peasant was property. If you wanted to hurt an enemy knight, you didn't lay siege to his castle. That was hard. You simply burned the fields worked by his peasants and killed his cattle. That was making war. The Code of Honor said nothing about not trampling a farmer under your 1,300-pound horse. That was just collateral damage. And then there was courtly love. That whole idea that the knight suffered for some unreachable lady. The knight wrote poems, or paid a minstrel to write them, and wore the lady's colors in the tournament. But don't get it twisted. It was pure social posturing. It was a way of showing that you were refined, that you didn't just know how to split skulls with an axe, but also knew which fork to use at dinner. In real life, marriages were land deals and political alliances. Love was something left for poems, or for sneaking off into the castle garden. In short, the Code of Chivalry was an exclusivity contract. I don't kill you because you're noble, and you don't kill me because we're in the same VIP club. As for everybody else, screw them. But what happened when the knight got bored? What happened when there was no official war to fight in? Well, that's when the true face of knighthood came out. Banditry, bloody tournaments, and an obsession with status that drove them half insane. If you thought all knights served a just king and lived in some perfect stone castle, get ready for disappointment. Knighthood was a profession, and like every profession, it had plenty of desperate people. Plenty of people with no scruples, and of course, plenty of fanatics. Imagine a man who has the equipment, armor, horse, sword, who knows how to kill, but has no land. What does he do? He sells himself to the highest bidder. These were the Knights of Fortune, or mercenaries. They grouped themselves into what were called free companies. They were basically a walking mafia. Today, they fought for the Duke of Burgundy, and if tomorrow the King of France paid them one more franc, they switched sides in the middle of the campaign. Loyalty meant absolutely nothing to them. All they cared about was loot and wages. They were incredibly dangerous because they had nothing to lose except their equipment, and they were willing to do anything to get it back. But my favorites are the Raubritter, or robber knights. This was very common in Germany. Imagine a noble with an incredibly grand-sounding last name, but finances in complete ruin. His castle was falling apart, and his peasants were starving. His solution? Become a professional highway robber. The Raubritter put on his armor, hid in a forest near a trade route, and when a caravan of rich merchants came by, he jumped out and charged them a road use tax. In other words, he robbed them down to their socks. The Code of Chivalry said, protect the merchant, but the Raubritter read that as rob the merchant. It was medieval outlaw culture taken to the extreme, using your noble status to justify the fact that you were just a common criminal. And finally, there were the ones who were actually terrifying: the Templars, Hospitallers, and Teutonic Knights. These were monks with swords. Imagine combining the discipline of a monastery, elite military training, and extreme religious fanaticism. They did not fight for money or land. They fought for God. They had strict rules. They were not allowed to retreat from battle unless they were outnumbered 3-1. They were the deadliest shock troops of the age, but they also became some of the richest and most powerful organizations in Europe. They got into banking, collected tolls, and accumulated land, all in the name of the faith. By the end, they had more money than many kings and more weapons than many armies. They were the military-industrial complex of the 12th century. Every empire comes to an end, and the empire of these tanks with legs came to its end in the most humiliating way possible. It was not a dragon or a magic spell that finished them off. It was technology and basic physics. For centuries, a knight was nearly invincible against a peasant, but then came the English longbow and the crossbow. Picture the scene. A noble who has spent 21 years training, wearing thousands of dollars worth of armor, riding a horse worth 20 oxen, charges in full fury. And then, suddenly, some ragged peasant who smells like manure, standing 200 yards away, sends a steel-tipped arrow through his armor like it's butter. That was not honorable war to the knight. That was cheating. The knight wanted an epic face-to-face duel, not to be killed at a distance by a peasant. In battles like Agincourt, thousands of French knights were slaughtered by English archers who barely even got their boots dirty. It was the ultimate humiliation. Their greatest fear came true. A cheap weapon and a peasant with good aim destroyed their monopoly. But the final nail in the coffin was gunpowder. When the harquebus appeared, that first loud, inaccurate firearm, the knight knew his time was over. Suddenly, it didn't matter how many metal plates you strapped to your body. A lead ball fired with gunpowder could punch a hole in you that no armorer could fix. The harquebus was the ultimate equalizer. A coward with an iron tube could kill the bravest knight in seconds. In the end, knights became something obsolete and absurdly expensive. Kings preferred professional infantry armies that were more disciplined, cheaper, and easier to control. The knight went from being the elite war machine to being a walking museum piece, useful mostly for tournaments and decorating the king's court. The gangster in armor retired and became little more than court decoration. So the next time you watch a movie where some perfect blonde knight talks about saving the world, remember the reality. Remember the exploited page, the squire tightening buckles so the noble wouldn't crap himself, the Raubritter robbing caravans, and the thousands of peasant families who paid with their hunger and their lives for the dream of knighthood.